what are the different places which actually require the expertise of sommeliers? So could you just help us understand that? Like restaurants for sure, but what are the other avenues?
Certainly. So there are really multiple tracks that a sommelier can take. There's what we call the on-premise side, and on-premise means that the beverage is consumed on the premises where it's purchased. So that is restaurants, hotels, cruise ships, private yachts, casinos, resorts, wine bars, anything where a guest is going to come in, select an item, and consume it there. And I have been the sommelier of everything I just named: private yachts, restaurants, hotels, everything you can think of, wine bar. Then there is the off-premise track, and that is the wines are consumed away from where they're purchased. That's really retail. So wine shops, liquor stores, etc. Most wine shops don't require a sommelier, but if you are a sommelier, you definitely lend not an advantage to the wine shop to have you. So many sommeliers enjoy retail, especially because the hours in retail are a little more normal. You know, the restaurant world, we work nights, we work holidays, we work weekends, we work when everyone else plays. In retail, it's a little bit different. So it's a logical progression that many people transition into retail because it gives them just a little bit better quality of life. Another path that sommeliers can go and often make the transition from restaurants into this path, if not retail, is the supply side, working for distributors, importers, regional organizations, brand groups, that own multiple wineries or in one region or around the world, or even a specific winery where they become the brand ambassador. And that, again, it's a different way to apply what you've learned in an environment where you're educating about wine, encouraging people. Then other tracks, the education track, so teaching at wine schools or teaching private events, which I also do, is another way that you can go. And again, it's just a really enjoyable way to interact with people and connect with them outside of a transactional basis. You know, in restaurants or hotels or whatever, there's a transaction, but in education, the transaction is I'm going to teach you to enjoy wine more in whatever capacity. So those are the main ways. There are other things that one can do with a sommelier certification, the sommelier career, but those are really the main ways that you can take your certifications to your career.
Right. So after your certification is done, what are the different, can you start practicing post the certification, or do you need a lot of training experience and you need to work under someone? So how does that go?
So the beauty of being a sommelier is it's both a certification, but it's also a job or a career. So you can
Right.
work as a sommelier without having any training or certifications whatsoever. Now, that doesn't mean you'll be a very good one. And cruise lines are a good example. On a cruise line, the sommelier is someone who's hired to sell wine, but that doesn't mean they have any certifications or abilities. And I can tell you, I've been on a number of cruises where I've thought to myself, you're a wonderfully charming individual, but you're not a sommelier. You don't have wine knowledge. You're just a wine waiter in that you're taking a wine order and opening the wine for the guest. And I'll tell you, it somewhat frustrates me when people without any kind of training, not certifications don't really matter, but knowledge matters. But when people without the knowledge or the training are put into a role where they are a sommelier, what they're really doing is being a wine steward or a wine waiter. The more training, the more experience the more training certifications you have, the easier it is to unlock better jobs. But ultimately, you learn so much interacting with guests. So the best experience or the best training you can get is a sommelier's experience. So anyone who's looking to break into the career, I would certainly encourage you to take some classes or some certifications, but ultimately find a wine bar, find a restaurant, find someone where you can work with them and under them, hopefully in a mentor-mentee capacity, so you can learn the trade craft by practice. And I'll give you a good example. Imagine a surgeon who has studied books and has seen every film possible on, I don't know, arterial surgery. They might have that knowledge, but that doesn't mean that they could then perform an arterial surgery because they haven't had the experience. So all the certification in the world doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have the practical experience. Likewise, if you mentored someone to be an arterial surgeon who never picked up a book, but they've seen and assisted with thousands of surgeries, they're going to be pretty good at it. So you don't necessarily need certification. It certainly helps, but very important to be humble, be willing to start an entry-level position and where you really just are interested in learning everything there is to know about how to be a sommelier.
Right. And if you have to work with different brands, so what is the path that you have to take for that? Like, how do you approach different brands, or just trying to work with them in the future? So how does that work?
So the reason that I mentioned that most people start in on-premise and then transition into brands or suppliers, distributors, is because one of the things that a brand is going to be looking for to hire a sommelier as a brand ambassador, as a sales director, or as an educator, is that they have experience, they have knowledge, and they have connections. And so the whole idea behind a brand ambassador is you're helping create brand awareness. If you have spent 4 years, 5 years, 10 years working in restaurants and hotels as a sommelier, then you know, in theory, hundreds of fellow colleagues. So you have access to these people. You have the wine knowledge, and you can assist the brand in selling. Brands will hire somebody with no experience to help them sell their brands. It's just, it would be, I don't know, like somebody who doesn't know anything about cars getting a job selling cars. Well, if you don't know anything about cars, it's not that you couldn't sell them, you just wouldn't be as effective as if you had the experience. And I'm being general, but if anybody's interested in working for a brand or a brand group or on the sales side of things, really some measure of experience, a few years of experience in restaurants and hotels is going to be a vital step in that direction.
Right. And so basically, when you talk about wines, how do you kind of, what are the steps to understand the different nuances about the wine, or try to understand what kind of taste it has, and about basically what are the steps and what are the things you have to consider?
Certainly. So I want to say that nobody is born an expert sommelier. Yeah, it comes from,
Right.
like anything, it comes from practice and repetition. I like to use sports as an analogy. Some people are more athletically inclined than others, but nobody woke up and was the world's best basketball player or the world's best football player. It takes time, it takes training, it takes effort. You're not born with a cricket bat in your hand and suddenly you're great at cricket, right? You have to learn and study. So it's the same thing with being a sommelier. So a lot of people think, oh, I could never be a sommelier because like they can pick up a glass and look at it and smell it and taste it and tell you what it is. Well, that's a learned skill that takes practice and training like anything else. So in terms of the steps, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of study. It takes a lot of repetition. Being a sommelier is about having theory, the knowledge to understand regions and wines and how wines are made and the points of differentiation between different sub-regions and different styles of production and what that all translates to in a glass. It also requires an amount of study that to be able to quantitatively and qualitatively assess a wine on visual cues, smell, taste, and structure, and have an idea of what it is or where it's from. And it's about putting all that together. So to get on that path, you really have to study theory, your book work. You need to be constantly tasting as much as you can. And when you taste, you need to really be thoughtful about what you're tasting, what you like and what you don't like, and as importantly, why you might like or not like it. Now, the reason for all that is you can then translate all that information to a guest when you're assisting them with a wine selection, or when you're doing a food and wine pairing, or when you're doing education, or when you're representing a brand. You sort of put all this round knowledge together and focus it on whatever the goal of the interactions.